Let us read Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. You may have heard the famous story about the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. In the late 1800s, John Roebling had a daring vision of a suspension bridge connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn, an idea almost everyone thought was impossible. During construction, John was fatally injured, and his son Washington Roebling became the chief engineer. Shortly after, Washington developed severe decompression sickness that left him unable to walk or speak normally. Confined to his room, he watched the construction through a small window, but he still believed the bridge could be completed. The only way he could communicate was by tapping one finger on his wife's Emily's arm. She learned to interpret his taps, relay his instructions to the workers, and essentially became the bridge's voice and overseer. Through unbelievable difficulty and unseen labor, the Brooklyn Bridge was completed. The public saw the visible bridge, but behind the scenes was an unseen guiding presence, a man unable to stand, building through the determined hands of another. Without that unseen guidance, the bridge would never have stood. In a similar but far deeper way, Psalm 127 invites us to recognize the unseen hand of God in every area of our lives. We may see the bricks, tools, plans, and human effort, but Scripture reminds us that behind our visible work is an invisible builder, protector, and provider who makes all things stand. This is one of the Song of Ascents. Pilgrims sang these psalms as they journeyed up toward Jerusalem. As they climbed, they reminded themselves of this fundamental truth. Human effort without divine involvement is ultimately empty. The psalm opens with the blunt yet liberating reality. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. The psalmist is not condemning building or guarding or working. He's showing us the limits of our human strength and the necessity of God's hand in all things. You can have bricks, mortar, resources, planning, intelligence, and human strength, but without God's active help, the entire structure collapses. We see this principle dramatically illustrated in Genesis 11 with the Tower of Babel. God had commanded humanity to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. But the people did not want to scatter. Instead, they settled in Shinar and said, "Let us build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves." It was a project rooted in pride, independence, and self-glory. They built not under God, but without Him and even against His purposes. So what characterizes any building done without God? First, it stands in opposition to His will. Second, it feeds our desire to make a name for ourselves rather than glorify Him. In contrast, when God builds a house, it follows His instruction, depends on His strength, fulfills His purposes, and brings glory to His name. One is fueled by independence. the other by dependence. The psalm then moves from construction to protection. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. You may have the strongest walls, the most advanced security, the bravest guards, the sharpest intelligence, but it is God who ultimately protects. The story of Elisha and his servant in 2 Kings 6 gives a vivid picture. The Syrian army surrounded the city and the servant panicked. But Elisha, with calm confidence, prayed that the servant's eyes would be opened. Suddenly, the servant saw the invisible army of God, chariots and horses of fire encircling them. What the servant could not see was more real than the enemy he could see. This is the quiet confidence that this psalm gives us. Behind every effort, every success, every deliverance, every protection stands the unseen hand of God. In verse 2, the psalmist addresses another common struggle, or anxious toil. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. God is not rebuking diligence or hard work. Scripture consistently commends both. Instead, he is addressing the restless anxiety that often drives our work, the striving that believes everything depends on us, the fear that keeps us awake, the worry that steals our joy. Jesus echoed this theme in Matthew 6 when he asked, "Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing?" In other words, real life is not sustained by anxiety, but by trust. Trust in the unseen Father who feeds the birds and clothes the lilies. Sleep becomes in the psalm a symbol of trust. For his beloved, God gives rest. The ability to lay your head down and truly rest is not merely a biological function, it is a spiritual gift. It is the sign of a heart surrendered to the one who watches while we sleep. Then the psalm turns to something foundational, family, the very building blocks of society. In a culture that increasingly views children as burdens, the psalmist confronts our thinking with ancient truth. Children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Scripture consistently places fruitfulness under God's blessing. Moses in Deuteronomy 28 lists the fruit of the womb among the covenant blessings for obedience. Children are gifts entrusted by God, not merely for our joy, though they certainly bring joy, but for his purposes. The psalmist urges the image of arrows in the hand of a warrior. In ancient times, arrows were handcrafted with patience and precision. The archer shaped them carefully so that when the time came to release them, they would fly straight and true. Once released, the archer no longer controlled their path. His responsibility was in the shaping, not the flight. So it is with raising children. God commands parents to teach diligently, to train intentionally, and to shape faithfully. Deuteronomy 6 calls for teaching God's commands in everyday rhythms and sitting, walking, lying down, and rising. Proverbs tells us to train our children not in the way they want to go, but in the way they should go. The Hebrew word train, kanak, carries the sense of narrowing, guiding, directing, shaping toward the one true path, Christ himself. The psalm ends by saying, "Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate." A full quiver, children who are shaped well, is a source of strength, honor, and legacy. Society may mock the idea of many children, but God calls it blessed. Yet the tragic irony is that Solomon, who wrote these words, did not appear to raise many wise children. His successor, Rehoboam, rejected the counsel of the elders, lacked the fear of God, and caused the kingdom to be divided. Solomon could build a magnificent temple, but he failed to shape his own arrow. It is a warning to us. Shaping our children is part of our spiritual warfare. It is as vital as prayer, preaching, or service. We are called to be examples, protectors, guides, and disciplers. In a world where families are fragmented, values are eroded, and children grow without boundaries or biblical truth, the breakdown of society is never far behind. Godly families are the soil from which godly societies grow. As we bring all of this together, Psalm 127 gently but firmly calls us to recognize the unseen hand of God in every aspect of life: our work, our protection, our rest, our families. He builds, He guards, He provides, He sustains. Our role is not passive, but neither is it independent. We labor, but never alone. We build, but never in our own strength. We raise children, but only with God's help. And so the practical question becomes, where in your life are you building without Him? Where are you striving anxiously as though everything depends on you? Where do you need to acknowledge His unseen hand? Maybe it's your career, your ministry, your studies, or your financial pressure. Maybe it's parenting, your marriage, or future plans. Maybe you've been eating the bread of anxious toil, forgetting that rest is a gift God longs to give to His beloved. Today, invite the Lord back into your building. Ask Him to be the architect of your plans, the guardian of your home, the provider of your needs, and the shaper of your family. Learn to rest in His invisible yet unfailing hand. Because unless the Lord builds, we build in vain. But when the Lord builds, everything stands. God bless.